Perfect. Well, let's get started. Welcome to the Navan product tour. My name is Alex Nelson. By background, I'm a former auditor, CPA by trade. Been in Navan for about 3.5 years now. So ultimately, I'll be walking us through the platform today. With that being said, I'm joined by my colleague Ryan Racer as well. Ryan's very similar background to myself with some consulting mixed in as well. So really lucky to have him. We have about 30 minutes today. So we're going to spend the majority of the time kind of really getting your eyes on the platform itself. A couple of slides to just kind of set the stage for you. But with that being said, please ask away with any questions you have throughout the conversation. Ryan will be kind of managing the chat there. And we'll do our best to answer any questions you have. But without further ado, let's hop into it. So this is the high level agenda again, just again summarizing, and then we'll actually get your eyes on the platform and then answer any questions that we might have remaining at the end of the half hour. But with that, really the question is naturally, why does Navan exist? What are we here to do? What are we here to really help address? And ultimately, this is kind of the answer that or the problem we're trying to solve here. A lot of different systems are in place when it comes to managing T&E, and ultimately it takes a lot of human power to stitch together all these various platforms together to give you clarity and context as to what's really transpiring, why your employee's spending, what's it related to, and the like. Um, so as you can kind of see, and as you all I'm sure know, a lot of different players in the space. And again, this is really the lift that typically falls on the accounting team's shoulder to stitch us all together to get that clarity as to what's really happening. When it comes to just the general space, broadly speaking, companies are often left having to decide between stringent cost control and user experience, right? Typically, they're at odds with one another inherently. And really, this is why Navan exists and why our founders built Navan in the first place is to address this problem and kind of marry those two, right? How do we get a clean user grade experience that folks are expecting to use as they do with their United, their Delta, their Marriott, their Hyatt, what have you experience, but also give the company that clarity and visibility, and most importantly, kind of managing that cost control side of things there. Uh, so really, that's kind of that trade-off there that Navan's really hoping to broach and has broached. So really, this is the opportunity that Navan's here to provide. It's a tech-forward, AI-forward solution, modernizing and centralizing travel and unifying travel and expense. And the result of that is pretty astounding from our customer base. So 90% of bookings are being driven through these mediums. Virtual travel agent CSAT scores really critically. So people are actually really enjoying the experience that they're getting with their human agent, or rather with the Navan agents Ava facilitating those changes and the like. And importantly, very quick time to booking process as well, right? We want folks in and out of the platform efficiently because we don't want folks having to spend significant time researching flights, double checking policy handbooks and the like, instead getting them in and out of the tool and getting them back to their day jobs, more importantly there. Uh, Uniquely, this is where Navan is fundamentally different from the rest of the market, is we're actually unifying travel, payments, and expense under one singular roof without the necessity to white label as all the other new age players are really having to do current state. A lot of tools start on travel and then have to partner with an expense tool or vice versa, right? So it's really, we're still at that same fundamental problem of having to manually stitch together and piecemeal the T&E experience, whereas Navan instead has brought all of it under one singular roof for that single pane of glass, that single experience. And so again, this is where we kind of unify that all. So not only just from the trip booking side of things, of planning, but also, hey, as you're getting ready to travel, importantly, and then mid-travel, need to make cancellations, make changes, and the like, all completely self-serve. And then, of course, the actual expensing that takes place along the way as well. And so beyond that, proactive policy enforcement is really the name of the game. Importantly, on the travel side of things, but also on the meals, the taxis and rideshare and things of that effect. With that comes Navan's ability to automatically send credit card authorizations to facilitate the coverage of travel spend, specifically for those hotels, a historically very difficult piece to manage. All of this culminating in the automation of the expense report. Again, travel is ultimately an expense and is a very arduous, very complex expense at its core. And with that comes Navan's ability to actually manage expensing and payments in a variety of ways. We'll kind of go in this exact flow with really focusing on the travel payments and CCAs for the travel bookings. Separately, Navan has virtual purchase cards, really typically filling the gap of department cards and kind of very high dollar things like software subscriptions that maybe you don't want employees to have access to $10,000 plus on a daily basis. You can instead provision purchase cards for more ad hoc spend or very specific use cases. And separately, of course, the ability to manage physical cards as well as reimbursements there on the far right. Again, for the meals, the taxis, the on-the-job expenses that kind of naturally occur, as well as reimbursements. This is a quick little snapshot of some of our customers, some of our favorite logos here. Really, the beauty is just some of these metrics and really the impact that Navan has been able to provide for them. Obviously, name of the game is going to be savings. But importantly, it comes in a variety of manners. Classically, it's going to be the travel savings, right? So companies like Informa or HelloFresh seeing over 20% savings across flights and hotels, and separately saving time, importantly, on the accounting process as well. So companies like Zoom and Asana seeing significant efficiency gains when it comes to their month-end close process and just the policy enforcement process as well. Perfect. With that, let me hop into the actual demonstration itself. So let's go through a quick travel booking first and foremost, and then we can actually hop into the experience of what it's like to manage those expenses as an end user as well down the line. So let me do just that. Beautiful. So this is the Navan home screen. I'm actually going to quickly hop into the profile section. Reason being, and maybe really quickly, if we have any delegates on the line today, importantly, we have the ability to support delegate management, both of travel and expenses. So I'm currently logged in as my coworker, Steve here, and this is where I have the ability to actually manage his travel. And so all of this information is going to be automatically populated in terms of travel information, but also details like TSA numbers and the like, password information, the user will input, and then that will automatically be applied to all bookings thereafter. Separately, as well as loyalty programs, folks expect and frankly require the ability to continue to accrue their points, their miles, etc. So by all means, they will continue to do so with Navan. Again, keeping in mind that user experience being paramount, because again, if folks don't enjoy the experience of booking on any corporate travel tool, they will go off platform. In doing so, the company then loses that visibility and that cost control that you're ultimately after. With that in mind as well, airline credits, a classically very difficult component of travel to manage. Historically speaking, it's a bit of a black box, right? If an employee goes off platform, completely lost to the company as to whether or not those funds are actually being utilized for corporate use. Separately, for other programs, for managed programs even, they might have the ability to track those credits on your behalf. However, it typically requires the end user to actually have to pick up the phone and talk to a travel agent to get those credits utilized, right? Candidly, I'm sure any of your road warriors are less than excited to pick up the phone and talk to a travel agent, right? They want self-serve. That's what they expect. And so by all means, that's what Navan will give them is the ability to, in the booking flow, automatically apply those credits on their behalf without the user needing to do anything, importantly. The reason any of this even matters, I should say in the first place, is airlines make a significant proportion of their revenue annually based off of these credits going expired. It's free money for the airline at the end of the day, right? So this is a really critical component to the cost reduction and cost management of travel programs. With that, let me hop back into my own profile and we can do a quick hotel search. So let's say I'm heading out to, I was doing a search earlier today. Say I'm heading out to Minneapolis, you know, and let's say we're going out in August. Should be a beautiful time of year right there. So a really critical component to all this as well is Navan's inventory, right? If folks don't see the hotel properties at the prices that they're expecting, that is an immediate broach of trust, and instantly folks will go off of the platform. And then as a result, again, as I've harped on already, you lose that cost control, you lose that visibility that you're ultimately after. And so right here with Navan's dynamic policy, instead of a flat nightly rate, we want the industry, if you will, the actual inventory available in a given location to help define what is appropriate booking costs for a given traveler. Classically, companies set a flat nightly rate across the board. They might have certain cities that have additional variability. However, the repercussion to that is For example, if you give me $300 per night, I'll take the example of Chicago, right? Chicago in the summertime, beautiful. $300 per night, I'm at the Motel 6 in all reality, right? However, in the wintertime, $300 gets me the Four Seasons all of a sudden, right? And so with that, there's a lot of opportunity for cost savings. And so Navan wants to utilize what we call dynamic policy, where we will look at all the available inventory to help understand what is it reasonably going to cost for a given user to travel to a given location at a given point in time. And so in this scenario, specifically for myself, that's $308. Obviously, for our executive team, that's going to be a lot higher. Maybe for our interns, it'll be a lot lower, right? So you can kind of build flexibility into the system when it comes to who the traveler is, very importantly as well. And so in this example here, we can see 308 is that number for myself. To then take it a step further, because if you give me 308, the classic employee is going to look for something that's $307 right on the money, right? Because they treat it like an allowance. It's not their money, so they're going to capitalize. And so what Navan has done then is we've introduced Navan Rewards, where your employees will start to accrue dollar for dollar rewards as a means to align their incentives of booking hotels with that of the company. And so in essence, if I book below this 273 point, I, as the end user, will start to accrue Navan Rewards, right? So this $233 hotel, this four-star Hilton, becomes a lot more alluring to me, and I'm much more likely to select this because on a per night basis, excuse me, I will start to accrue those rewards. In terms of utilizing those rewards, I can then go take those rewards and use them on the personal side of the Navan platform and get dollar for dollar discounts on my next vacation, as an example. So that's really how we're aligning the employees' incentives with that of the business, importantly there. So I can go ahead and I'll select this. This will then take me to the actual landing page of the search screen here. And importantly, again, we want this to feel like a user-grade experience, right? This should feel as if I'm on Hilton.com, United.com, Marriott, what have you, right? That's what folks are expecting nowadays. So we can see, hey, this is actually importantly part of the Navan Lodging Collection. I'd missed that as well, where Navan, leveraging our roughly $10 billion of travel spend flowing through the system annually, we've gone out and negotiated rates on behalf of our customer base to then pass those savings onto you all as the customers. Uh, Perfect. And from there, we then have the ability to kind of see, hey, maybe there's some recommended options for me based off of my historical activity. So Navan's actually going to start to learn how your employees are booking over time. And as you can see here, we have some additional options. These coming in from Hilton directly, but also we have inventory coming in from folks like Booking.com, Expedia, Hotels.com, Priceline, and the like. So very critically, Navan is agnostic to inventory sources here, right? So with that in mind, I can get my 1,900 Hilton points right here. I can also get $6 in Navan rewards. All of my cancellation policy is readily available to me as the end user. I'll go ahead and I'll earn these $6 in Navan rewards right here. We're now at the checkout page. Fundamentally, when it comes to expense management, Navan is taking the approach of eliminating the expense report, right? We want to reduce that experience, that clunky experience of no employee looks forward to, no accounting person is excited about. Instead, what we can do is actually, in a sense, trick your employees into proactively completing their expense reports. What I mean by that is ultimately any coding that folks need to do on their reports today, we can now capture that here prior to purchase and then automatically pass that information along to the back end. So for me, it's just trip purpose. Maybe for your company, you require a project code or a company ID, things to that effect can all be built out here. And very critically, we can have relationships between fields as well. So essentially an if-then functionality. Based off of an initial selection, Navan can limit the specific options for that follow-up field. Critically as well, I can't even move forward with the booking flow until I've given you that visibility into the data there. Perfect. I'll skip through most of this. Again, quite confident I could throw any of you into Navan and you'd be able to book your flights and hotels and the like quite simply. It's a very self-serve experience, as you can see. A very nice little feature is the ability to also extend your stays with a personal booking. So if you wanted to stay the weekend, as an example, right, you have the ability to extend your trip. Navan will automatically bifurcate the transaction to have part of it be on the personal card, part of it be on the corporate card, right there. Of course, my cancellation policy is readily available to me. If I had Hilton Honors, they would automatically be applied. Maybe I should get one of those for myself. And then finally, the payment method. This is where Navan's unification of T&E is really rearing its head and where it's so impactful. The classic experience is we'll throw a single Amex card into the back end of, say, Concur, as an example, Any of the accountants on the call that have had to reconcile that activity know how painful and tedious that is to look at an anonymized Amex statement and then go line by line, cross-referencing the booking report coming out of your travel tool there. Because Navan is the unified T&E solution, we have all the context necessary to automate the submission and coding of these activities on behalf of your users without you needing to do anything. Very, very importantly, right? And so what I mean by that is if I were to book this right now, importantly, I should say, I as an end user, I don't even see a credit card number very critically as well. So this is specifically tied to the Navan system when it comes to booking. And for those pesky CCA forms, Navan has the ability to automatically transmit those credit card authorization forms to the hotel property as well to facilitate the coverage of those expenses. So if I were to book this right now, Navan has the ability to, or rather, the employee's experience is done, right? They've booked on Navan, they've used the corporate card, the employee is done when it comes to submitting their expense report. Instead, what Navan can do here is automatically code and submit their activity on their behalf. So here we have what is the end result of that experience. We know that a United transaction happened for about $640. Down below, we can see that Tyler was the traveler in this circumstance, right? Even if I had booked this trip on behalf of Tyler, Navan still understands, hey, Tyler's the traveler, therefore this is what his coding should be. Navan can set the GL code, but also the department, cost center, region, subsidiary, and legal entity, all coming from your HRIS system, or of course the CSV upload, or even a single sign-on tool. And then finally, again, any of those custom fields from the checkout screen, a trip name, a trip purpose, a project code, job number, whatever else you might need. The final piece of the puzzle then I'm sure everyone's thinking is, hey, where's the receipt? By virtue of Navan being the travel platform, we can then automatically match the receipt on behalf of the user here as well. So that's really how we complete the expense submission process on behalf of the user and how we eliminate the necessity for an expense report in the first place because we have all the components and context necessary to automatically submit the transactions on behalf of the employee here. Perfect. That's the end user's booking experience side of the process. What I'll get into now is going to be much more of the expense management configuration and really the impact to their end. I am keeping on the clock. I want to make sure we get a lot of coverage here. So let me first speak to the user list, actually, because this is the foundation for the rest of the system, fundamentally. This is that HRES/single sign-on/CSV upload process. Ideally, there is an automatic process taking place here. Reason being, we don't want you to have to manage the user list within Navan. Let's plug into a source of truth that already exists, importantly. And so this is my own profile. As I scroll to the right, we'll understand this is rather how Navan understands my title, my department, my manager, my approver if they're different, my cost center, my office, region, subsidiary, etc. Right? Through this integration is how we can automatically provision and deprovision access to the tool for those new hires, but also those terminations. And then separately, this is how we auto code the activity as well. Through this means is how we understand how, what my cost center is, what my region is, et cetera. And then finally, very, very uniquely to Navan, we can then use these various attributes to help define proactively how an employee should and should not be spending. Very, very importantly. And so with that, the configuration of the policies themselves, on the payment method side of the system here, immediately and proactively, you have the ability to assign usage of corporate cards. Naturally, hey, most or rather a significant portion of the company may not get access to a corporate card in the first place, right? That's perfectly fine. They will go through a reimbursement workflow all the same, not a problem, right? For us, it's those interns. Separately, the general policy maybe is that cards are always active. The reason that we have always active as a designation is because Navan also has the opportunity to provide trip-enabled cards. What that really means is Navan, being the travel solution, has the ability and clarity and context to understand whether or not the user was on a business trip in the first place. Like most of us, how the user spends dramatically changes whether or not they're on a business trip, right? Candidly, myself, there's no business purpose in me being able to touch the corporate dollar unless I'm on a business trip, right? And so Navan, being the travel tool, has that context automatically. Separately, on the receipt capture side of the system, importantly with these corporate cards, it's real-time visibility and spend. Meaning I swipe my card, and before I've turned away from the barista at my coffee shop of choice, there's already a notification on my phone prompting me to collect my receipt, depending upon the threshold that's been set for me. Maybe it's a certain dollar cap, Maybe it's always required, completely configurable, whatever those needs might be. And again, that can vary from a user group to user group. So maybe for our EMEA employees, that's required always, things to that effect. Very uniquely too, a lot of the new age players really require you to use their corporate cards because that is the fundamental way that they make revenue, right? But instead with Navan, we've understood that, hey, enterprises require flexibility and they require their banking partnerships too, right? And so really what Navan calls Connect is the ability to integrate with your existing card program as well. So a very unique differentiator there. And what's nice is for the Visa and MasterCard program holders, we've also extended this real-time visibility that I alluded to with Navan cards. That will also apply to your MasterCard and Visa card program too. So a fundamental shift from the current approach where you swipe that corporate card, Concur, Expensify, Chrome River, you name it, the transactions don't even show up in your expense tool until they post by the vendor. That's where the receipts get lost. That's where you forget participants. That's where you forget context when it comes to the submission process, but also where we become reliant on the employee to give us all the details, ideally once at the end of the month, in all reality, right? And so with that, let me hop into the actual policies themselves. Again, fundamentally, Navan is moving away from the expense report as that method of submission, review, and approval, because as I mentioned, employees hate it. No one looks forward to it. Managers are supposed to go line by line. They're supposed to double check receipts. They're supposed to double check coding and ultimately enforce policy. What ends up happening more often than not is that they rubber stamp it. They might catch one or two things maybe that looks like really egregious, but short of that, not much value actually being added. And so accounting has to reperform that exact same exercise that management was supposed to. Accounting now has to go line by line, double checking receipts, double checking coding, enforcing policy and the like. Typically happening at the worst possible time being the month end close. And so you're rushing through all these expense reports, this tidal wave of activity coming into the system. And so with Navan, instead, we've taken a transactional model to the entire experience. And so, for example, a traveling meal for myself, right? I swipe my corporate card or I submit for reimbursement. Either way, based off the date of the transaction, Navan understands, again, coming from the credit card or from the receipt, Navan understands whether or not I was traveling. Again, because how I spend dramatically changes based on that circumstance. Separately, based off of the vendor, Navan understands, hey, Starbucks sells food. We know this transaction now is a traveling meal, as well as I get $75 per day when traveling towards meals. That $5 cup of coffee is going to be approved every single time today by management and by accounting. Therefore, let's not waste time looking at the reasonable spend. Excuse me. Instead, let's focus our time and attention on the out of policy activity. The transaction that took place when the user wasn't traveling, if they overspent and they exceeded their dollar threshold, if they haven't attached a receipt, if they haven't completed any additional custom fields that might be required of them, let's go focus on the needles in the haystack rather than spending time going through all this activity line by line today. Critically, different employee groups should be spending their corporate dollar very differently as well. I'm not a manager here. I don't need the ability to touch this category of team events and meals. Flat out not allowed, right? However, our managers, directors, VPs, and executives, let's give them a policy that makes sense for their use case. And then you can see the ability to have policies depending upon the circumstance. So per participant-based limits, transaction limits, and time-based limits. Of course, the ability to support additional currencies beyond just US dollars too. Taking a step back as well, the travel context is such a vital component to all of this as well. Current state today, as an accounting staff, when I'm receiving an expense report, I have no clue what happened for a given transaction. I don't know when they got back from their trip. Did they sneak the lunch in after their trip had occurred, right? There's no way to know. But through Navan's unification of Teeny, we have that context to have different policies depending upon the circumstance and the scenario. And so for us, at least, there's no business purpose in me being able to go to Chipotle right now and buy myself lunch. Completely unreasonable because I'm not on a business trip, importantly. And of course, we talked about travel a lot, Navan. Reason is most transactions are incurred as users are traveling, but plenty occur outside of travel as well. And so this is the ability to manage that activity similarly, rather. So office supplies, shipping and postage, tools and materials as well. Same idea applies. And by all means, you have the ability to lower that policy limit to be $0 because maybe you do want to review all of the Home Depot spend that your crew is incurring, right? However, we don't want to waste our time looking at the other spend that we currently approve every single time today. So that's exactly the vision here of Navan. And what we've seen from our customers is about 75% of activity completely reasonable and expected spend by the employee. Let's not waste time on 75%. Let's go focus on that 25%. With that, we've then expanded our ability to actually manage the flagging, the policy enforcement itself in a very, very exciting and unique way. One of the scariest new revelations, if you will, when it comes to expense management is there's very little stopping employees from going to ChatGPT or Claude or your LLM of choice and just typing in, hey, make me a receipt for X, Y, and Z and make it X amount, right? Managers will be none the wiser. The image creation process is incredible nowadays. However, with Navan, we have the ability to give you that peace of mind and comfort that what is being submitted is legitimate, importantly there. Beyond that, things like excessive tipping, I see in different industries as being really relevant to capture. So you can customize that, whatever it might be, if you would like. By all means, things like itemized receipts, of course, we're going to leverage our OCR technology in-house to read in depth and ensure viability of the actual itemized receipts, and things like late submissions as well. You can customize those thresholds. And then finally, a personal favorite of mine is the ability to completely customize any additional flags. So things like alcohol, tobacco, or gift cards are classically very difficult to capture, and you have to go line by line, looking at every single image of a receipt to actually get this information today. Employees are trying to find ways to obscure this and get around this. And so instead, Navan can use software to do the hard things much more scalably, importantly. How this all ultimately shows up is within the activity tab itself. You have access in real time to all transactions throughout the system, right? You're no longer having to wait for an employee to decide when to submit activity for your review and approval, importantly. So we can actually see activity from just earlier today already available for me. But importantly, these transactions are reasonable. I'm really not worried about more going to a coffee shop. She was entertaining clients spending $10, completely within her policies. However, Mike right here, he added his manager as a participant. That's a little fishy. So now we can kind of deep dive that subset of information, right? And again, this is where you have the ability to customize all that. And so ultimately, this needs review section, these are the 56 transactions that are the needles in the haystack, right? And this is where we can focus your time and attention on what warrants your time and attention. And I have an example down here of a good review process of what it actually looks like to be reviewing some of this activity. And so right here, TJ, I believe it is in this example, had gone to Chipotle, right? Typically looks pretty innocuous, pretty reasonable spend, $33, got some extra chicken, what have you, some guacamole maybe, but it's been flagged for additional review as a result, right? $16 over the limit. What we can then do is Navan, even though we're enforcing policy transactionally, Navan wants to give you, the reviewer, clarity as to what really is happening, right? And so we can then see, $16 over the $91 policy limit, or rather spent $91, $16 over the $75 limit, excuse me, this specific transaction being that, right? Before even making a decision, Navan also has the ability to give you what we call a trip view. Extremely unique to Navan, again, by virtue of our unification of T&E, very importantly. Current state today, you get an expense report. You have no idea if this is one trip, if this is half of a trip, if this is multiple trips. Really obscure, really clever employees will submit multiple expense reports. So you're absolutely none the wiser. There's no way you can catch it in reality. And so instead, Navan being the travel tool, we know that TJ right here was traveling for these 6 days. He spent about $3,400 across that trip in its entirety, even though he'd booked his hotel well in advance and his flight well in advance. Navan still has the ability to bring it all into a single pane of glass for your context and review. We can then see the totals as well as the averages to gain clarity and help make a decision on what to do with that Chipotle transaction. And of course, we can see the line-by-line details here too. Bringing us back to this Chipotle transaction, by all means, I have the ability to approve that if I would like. Conversely, I could request more information or even go so far as to requesting repayment through the app. Navan will operate essentially as a Venmo or a PayPal, if you will, facilitating the recovery of that overspend by the employee, and issuing the company a credit for that amount. So no need to go through a payroll process, no need to go through a check process and the like on that side of things. That is the experience in a nutshell when it comes to travel and expense. We are at time today for the product tour. I really appreciate all the questions that came in. I'm sure Ryan does as well. If you're interested in learning more about Navan and you want to see a full demo, please, by all means, reach out to your Navan rep or request a demo. And thank you very much. And we really hope you all have a great rest of your day.